What I find interesting about KM is that it's probably really rooted in things that aren't that different from the past. And the reason I say this is because I have a vested interest in the outputs and outcomes of this ongoing forum, not just today, but the ongoing forum, because the people that you graduate in the future may be the talent that I'm competing for to come work for me as knowledge management consultants. So consequently, knowing that they're steeped in this kind of theory and allowing them that practical experience on the ground and then may even be competing with the same talent that Stan will be. So the point being that there are some things that we can create infrastructure for. It's a lot about change management. It's a lot about the people still, and I have to commend Mark for making the attempt. Our president, Dr. Carlo Odell, talks about above the flow and in the flow. So pretty close. The point being that if we're talking about knowledge management professionals in the context that I believe we're talking about, these are folks who will be principally above the flow of work. So that they are that office that Stan talks about. They are the ones that shepherd, the evangelist types, that will shepherd the program that should never go away. At the same time, they're there to enable the folks that Guy talked about who are in the flow. That is their work, okay? As I was listening to this, it made me reflect on the fact that most of my career has been in what we would call support services, staff. 19 years at General Motors in a stamping plant, mostly in industrial engineering, then strategic planning, then consulting. So I've always been sort of a person who's been above the flow of real work getting done. So I thank all those who really do, produce the outputs. But what that says to me then is that as an industrial engineer, we used to always have the same phrase as well. We need to work ourselves out of that role. And frankly, some organizations have actually done that. In a similar vein, General Motors has worked a lot of the quality department out of it because quality is everyone's responsibility. KM at some point may be like that when it matures. But I agree with Stan that at some point, some visible focal point still needs to be there. And maybe that's where our KM professionals finally reside as they go through their careers. Certainly early on, it's all about the change management as far as I'm concerned. One of the things that is very important to us is, and you may all know Steve Denning, is storytelling. The sort of visceral reaction that people get when you say, well, what's the ROI of KM? Personally, we don't care. But what we care is, in the context of stories, to transfer the real impact of that. No one needs to put a number on it. You can understand it. As soon as you hear there was some positive impact, okay, let's keep the good work going on. So stories become very important to us. And so I go back again to the change management piece. I'm looking for people who principally can be good consultants. And that's not self-serving, but I think what I'm suggesting is the consulting industry in general is actually sort of a microcosm of what I would like to see knowledge management professionals grow into in the future. And why is that? Well, they have a big picture view of the world. They need to really understand the strategic value that the organization brings, not just this KM thing. One of the things I find remarkably interesting about the people I work with, the clients, is that they're very familiar with the idea of knowledge management, knowledge sharing. They understand intrinsically its value, but they're so focused on this thing called KM. If I stop and say, yeah, well, how's it going to help your business? I get a blank. So they don't make the connection that knowledge sharing ought to have some positive impact on their business. And frankly, I'll tell you a true story. Just a few weeks ago, starting with a new client, going through with the idea that we always go through, which is start with the end in mind, I said, okay, what are the objectives of your organization? What is your organization chartered to do? Why do they exist? And they kept asking me, well, why do we need to know that? I said, well, just bear with me here. What are the current objectives of your organization? And I couldn't seem to get it through to them until finally one of the people said, and I quote, okay, Jim, I'll humor you. And here's our 6 objectives for the year. You'll humor me? These objectives were grow sales by 15%, reduce cost by X%, and so on. And I said, that's why we need to know that and understand it, because your knowledge sharing is going to provide the lift to achieve those goals. Because if you think about it otherwise, in any other context, your organization would attempt to achieve those goals without knowledge sharing anyway. So what additional value are you going to bring to the table by virtue of the collaboration and the knowledge sharing and the innovation? Otherwise, senior management may as well spend their money on something else. So they played along with me and now we're fine. But see, that's what I'm saying. I don't think we can be too stuck in this thing called KM for the sake of KM. But I'm happy that we're setting up infrastructure to do so, because there's certainly a lot of things we can learn about it that'll make them much more effective when they're actually in the role.